is going to be part of your lesson for your homework. I had mentioned talking more specifically about lighting and composition, and I thought the easiest way would to be to film a short video for you so you can actually see the different styles of lighting that I was talking about that we went over on Sunday. Let me start by saying I hope you're having an amazing time at camp right now. Um, Pardon my cat, and hopefully you don't hear my son too much during this, but yeah, I'm hoping that your time in Arizona is just incredible. But when you get a free moment, let's talk about lighting. So, um, as you can see on my screen, I'm going to be sharing some examples of my work specifically so we can talk about lighting and that kind of thing. So what I want to do also is be able to draw some arrows to things. So I am going to just select a color here real quick that is really obvious so you can see. All right, so we're going to start off with front lighting, which is the easiest of all lighting techniques to do. It is exactly what it says. The light is in front of your subject, right? So here they're front lit for the most part. You know, the light source is probably over here and going right onto their faces. Here, let me do that. Right onto their faces here. Nice and evenly lit. You don't see a whole lot of shadow. Everything is just nicely lit. Nice. This is happens to be really nice soft light, so it was most likely taken closer to the end of the day, or it was cloudy, and you can see it's a little bit diffused and just nice, really soft light. And this is another case of that where you can see the light was probably more coming from overhead, kind of from over this way, but her face is pointed towards it, and it's just kind of naturally, there's very, very little fall off. You know, and when I say fall off, there's very little dark shadows. You're not seeing a whole lot of dark shadows in here. You're only seeing just nice, evenly lit skin tone. Here's another example. Big light source is like right coming from behind over here and going right onto her face. Nice and even skin tones. Everything's well lit. Everything's bright and vibrant. And then last example, this one I specifically chose again, light is coming in on her face, looks really wonderful. And then if you zoom in, granted this isn't full on lighting, you can see that this half of her face is a little bit brighter, so the light source is probably coming from the side slightly, but what I want to point out in this is actually if it's front lit, and obviously if it's side lit, you're looking for these catch lights in the eyes, right? So you can see here that in her eye you see these little white spots. So let me be even more specific. This one and this one, those are what we call catch lights, okay? And that means the light is hitting the face evenly. That means there's light hitting her eyes, and her eyes are reflecting back that light. So these are some examples. This one's not a true front lit, but it showed that catch light so well. I wanted to show you that, and it's pretty evenly. The light source is, hold on, there's my mouse, is coming from over here, but I am reflecting light back on to here to reduce the shadows. So even though it's not a true front lit, it has the same kind of effect. All right, and here's another example. Light's coming in from overhead, it's diffused, and it's just nicely lighting the couple. Your shadows aren't too black. Everything looks nice and evenly lit. Here's another example. And then this is technically front lit, but I wanted to show you an example of how you can use really harsh midday light. This time of year especially, we're having the harsher light last longer. So I wanted to show you like the light is coming from overhead from here going directly towards them, and even though they are mostly front lit, you can tell that there are some really deep shadows in her legs, and if I had them open their eyes at this point, as you can see if I zoom in, she's laughing, her head's up, she's not really looking at the sun. You can see the dark shadows on his eyes, that kind of thing. This is an example of how you can pose your clients to interact with that harsher sun. So a lot of times I will have them do an action where it doesn't require them looking at the sun, but it does give some life to it. So if you're putting their face towards the sun, which gets rid of those dark shadows on their face, but you can see again like dark shadows under here and stuff. If I were to just place her in with her face down further, that would have created this kind of idea, these really dark shadows on her face. But instead, we've got this wonderful like action shot that just exudes joy. All right, next is obvious side light, right? So side light is a way to add drama, to highlight your couple, or it can just be, I use side light, probably side light and backlight more than I use front light, just because I like the depth in the shadows. I like adding that depth. So from here, you can see the light source is hitting them from here, is coming in onto both of them, just slightly grazing them. You can zoom in here. You can see that's a little blurry, but you get the idea. So the light is coming at a direction, right? And so then you can start to see darker shadows kind of fall along the body line, along here and along here. So it's not as evenly lit as front light, and it adds a little bit more drama we got going on here. And then here's another example. This is a bit of a softer example. Light's coming in from the side over here, and the way that the trees are positioned too, you know, she's kind of side lit, but he is not. So you can see these really dark shadows coming in, highlighting her. He's a little bit in shadow, adds that moodiness, adds that drama. Here's another example of side light that's not so, it is still kind of dramatic, I guess. This light's coming in from over here, and it's hitting that side of his face. It's hitting this side of her. So something to watch out for with side light is a lot of time somebody or a portion of somebody is going to be in darker shadow. So you need to pick and choose what that's going to be, or help direct your client so it's intentional rather than it being like, oh crap, you know, that was in shadow. So let's zoom in on these guys a little bit. Because this is such a far off photo, you don't really see their faces, so it kind of makes me laugh looking at their expressions. But so you can see this side of his face is in shadow, right? This is in shadow, but this side here is highlighted. So her body is here, and so her face is in shadow. Because of how dynamic this photo is, you know, we could get away with her being in shadow a little bit. Normally, I wouldn't put her this much in shadow, but because of the way that it's set up and there's lots of motion and it's just kind of a fun photo, we can kind of get away with it. Here's another good example of side light, dramatic side light. Light is coming in from this side, and you can see I used it to highlight the baby bump. Anytime I do a shot like this where it's really, really harsh light, like you can see really dark shadows, I always make sure that the guy's face is over the shoulder so his face is lit as well, because otherwise it's really easy for his face to get lost. So anytime I do a side shot like this, I make sure he leans over the shoulder so he is highlighted as well. And again, I tend to take it from far off, because if you look here, the highlights are kind of blown, like they're not completely blown, but it looks like that. So by making it a wider shot, it just, you know, kind of accentuates what I wanted to accentuate. It highlights the baby bump while everything else kind of falls away into shadow. All right, here's another great example of that same kind of thing, making sure both of the couples light, their faces are both in that light, further back shot, but it's really dramatic. But if you go in, you're gonna see, ooh, we don't wanna see that as a close-up. That's not very attractive, right? I wouldn't blow that up and frame it like that. However, this I would blow up and frame. So just to kind of give you some context when you're looking at side light, you need to understand, okay, is this harsh side light or is this a little softer side light? If it's softer side light, which we'll get into, you can kind of get closer with it. But when it's really harsh, like midday light, or say it's from a flash, you know, you're gonna be getting this kind of like blown out highlights, which you can make work if you're strategic about it. So taking it from further back instead of close up is the better option. All right, so here's another example. We've got a window over here. This is our source of light, and it's coming in and it's really diffused, right? This is a perfect example of what I was talking about with side light. And I've got her body turned mostly to it. The shadows are really soft. This is another example right from here. This is a window, and it's just gently hitting her. So something you're gonna, and I've kind of talked around this so far, something you're gonna wanna look for is the quality of your light. Is it really, really harsh? Is it soft and diffused? And that's gonna kind of determine how you compose and how you display your subject. Here's an example where the light source is actually in it, which is the window, again, coming right in on our subject's face. She is really nicely lit, but it's side light because you see all this fall off on the side, and on the side of her face. So again, side lit from a window, gentle, soft, diffused light. And this one is at sunset, again, side lit. You can see by her dress being highlighted, his face is highlighted. Again, she can be in shadow as long as it's not super dark shadow. So I'm exposing really for her face and this part of her body. And if this gets a little blown out, it doesn't usually bother me. In this case, it wasn't, which is great. But to give you an idea. And then here's a great example. I use it all the time for grooms. Men can handle side light really, really well. So side light here, this side of his face is in shadow, this side of his face is well lit, still looks really good because it's nice and diffused light. Here's one. I pointed this mom's body towards the light, so she, from this angle, is side lit even though her face is towards the light. Because again, you have all this fall off here, shadow, babies in shadow. So again, that has to be a choice. I didn't do all of the family photos like this because obviously you want to see baby too. You could also switch her around and have baby facing towards the light too and have mom and baby snuggling that way. This is just one in a many of compositions, but again, it's that nice, soft, diffused window light. And then here it is out in nature. The light is kind of coming in from above, from the side like this, and just gently grazing her. And then his face is in shadow just to kind of add some moodiness to it. All right, now we're going to get into backlight. So we had talked about this. There's several ways you can use backlight. This is, again, exposing for your subject, so you get this sunset, soft light, golden hour light, which we all love, and you're getting, you can get lots of different kinds of close-ups, and you can get far away. This is just showing you that the sun is obviously in the back and it is gently highlighting them. You can even see it highlights, it goes through her dress a little bit, and makes it this really lovely sunset vibe. This is more midday, harsh, but as you can see, it's against that dark background that I talked about, right? So this is even technically maybe a little bit side lit, but because of the way that her hair is lit up, to me it feels more backlit, but you're getting this lovely rim light, right? Right on the edge. You can see this is all lit up. It separates them from this dark background that they're in. And that's the big to do. I think the sun is like right over here somewhere. So it's coming down right there. And so this is a big thing to understand with backlighting your subjects is if you want this rim light, they need to be against a darker background, darker than the subject matter. Here's another example of that. You can see the sun is literally right here coming through, but they still have this lovely, here, let me bring up this lovely rim light right here, kind of grazing their faces. And that is because there's a forest behind them, and I intentionally had the trees behind them to get this yummy golden light. Here's an example midday. It's kind of half and half here. So this is the sky up here. The sun is pretty high up in the sky at this point, and it's coming down on them. You can see this lovely rim light that we have going on. But because it's not fully on a dark background, you're not noticing the rim light up here as much, because this is sky. You can kind of see it more on her hair down here and down here because that's against a darker background. Here's another great example of half and half. So let's zoom in on these guys. So the window light is the source, it's the light source. And because the groom is against a lighter background, you don't get the rim light. But because Dad is on the darker background, you get the rim light all in here. Like, look at that beautiful rim light all along his face, all along his head, and it separates him from this dark background here. And then another example of that beautiful, yummy sunset light coming in and just slightly kissing them. Zoom in. You can get that beautiful rim light that's heading all along here and all along there. And here's one last example of a lighter background, or a half and half. You can't see the rim light here, but you can as you go down her hair, and you can kind of see it kissed on their faces right here. Yeah. And again, you can play with it. What I love to do with sunset light is this yummy flare. Every lens flares differently, so you can do a little bit of both, let that sunshine come through. Always expose for their faces if you can. Here's another example, backlight highlighting the hair. And then one more over Dad's face, but it just adds some mood to it, adds some whimsy. Okay, here's that yummy rim light again, just kind of going over that way. And then here, okay. So my last thing we're gonna cover right now is silhouettes, which is backlit light. You can see this in this example, it's very obvious. You've got the sun right here, and you've got your subjects down here. Now this is the case, in this particular case, to make a silhouette, you are underexposing your subjects, right? You are intentionally making them dark because you want to make them like shadow. This really only works if you have cleaner spaces to work with, and I'll show you what I mean here in a second. You want to have, like, this is all negative space with the exception of the trees, right? So they really stand out against this big open sky with the sun behind them. Then you underexpose, bring them all down, bring them way down, and that's how I got the blue sky and all that fun stuff. And a lot of times you want to create separation with a silhouette. You don't want your couple like super squished together because then you lose shape. So a lot of times it's fun to have them do an action, kind of like this, here again against the dark wall. And then here's an example of, this is a backlit shot because these windows are all of the source, so it's not with the sun, but I did intentionally underexpose the couple so that the rest of the life in the photograph could kind of be highlighted, and then your eye is drawn to this sweet moment. So sometimes you can use it intentionally indoors. This is a soft silhouette, it's not a true silhouette. Oh, I thought I had one more silhouette, but I guess not. So trying to think if there was anything else in the silhouette. Let me go back to the silhouettes. I think that's the big stuff. Like, again, with silhouettes, it's fun to play with. You can do some romantic ones too, where they're a little bit closer together, almost kissing. I do try to create a little bit of separation in between them. Silhouettes can be fun for families too. You can do like them throwing kids up in the air and, you know, all sorts of fun things like that. Silhouettes are really fun to play with. So for your homework, I wanted you to play with each of these different lighting situations. I want you to take a photo where the client is front lit. All right, so we'll go back to the beginning. We'll do front lit. And then we'll do side lit. However you want to do it. It can be soft diffused, it can be harsh, it can be both. You know, you can play with both. It's up to you how deeply you want to get into it. And then backlit. We'll work on backlit. Again, depending on the quality of light that you're playing with. And then you can play with them indoor, outdoor too. Like, it's up to you what you want to use. You can use the sun by itself outside as a light source. You can bring your client inside and use window light. I want you to play with all the different kinds of light that you have at your disposal. It can be one photo shoot, it can be multiple photo shoots. You can try experimenting with the kiddos at camp and just looking for this light. I really want you just to look for the different qualities of light while you're shooting, because that is the big thing. If you understand, okay, this is soft diffuse light, this is harsh light, this is backlight, this is side light, this is front light, you're gonna be able to conquer pretty much anything. It really, this is the foundation. If you understand your light, the next step is understanding how to create your own light, which we'll talk about briefly too, but we're not going to get into Flash. That's with Flash too much, but we'll talk about it briefly at some point. Yeah, so if you have any questions on this content, please let me know. I'm happy to elaborate on any of it, and have fun playing, because that's the fun part. All right, girl, have a good time, and I will talk to you soon.